Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, What's New in Native Charts, presented by DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. In this session, Paul and Julian will explore the new features of DevExpress Native Charts, especially with regard to their use within Xamarin Forms. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today, and we will send the link to the recording in a follow-up email. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Mr. Bucknall.
And good morning to you, Mr. Usher, and welcome everybody to our first webinar of 2019, which seems a bit bizarre because we're talking about what's new in 18.2.
Yes, we are. So today's going to be a little different to our normal what's new. And as you generously pointed out, we're doing a version 18.2 webinar today, over 2 months since the actual release. And there's a little story behind that, Julian. And that is that the things I'm going to share with everybody today, I was supposed to share in our dashboarding and reporting webinar and skip the slide. And then I had to make a promise to the team that I would make it up and we will present. So here we are.
And otherwise they were going to send someone round in the dead of night to you.
Which was probably during the day for me, wouldn't it? Anyway. The
Yes.
Native Charts library is a specialty library, but it is an exciting time. Two things here today that I want to go through. First of all, I'm going to be running everything on my Mac, so I'm super excited about that.
That's going to be something new for us. We haven't really done any demos or presentations on a Mac before, so that's going to be a kind of an interesting direction to go in.
Now, the second part, which is probably the more exciting part, is the fact that not only are we going to show you what's new in version 18.2 for native charts, but we're also going to take a look at the roadmap and what the team have got planned for the native UI controls, and specifically around that Xamarin Form element. So that's really, really quite exciting. So having missed going through some of these things in November, it makes it more of a full webinar that we can step through those things. It will be a fair bit shorter than our usual 1 hour sessions though.
Okay, so let's kick it off.
New features in our native charts. I have to start with this.
Uh-oh.
A pie chart.
No, please. Come on. Pie charts, they're not. Never mind.
Is my screen showing? Okay.
No, I think you've got it paused or something. It's just showing the new features slide with nothing on it. There we go.
Excellent. Much better. So, pie chart.
Yeah.
What's really cool with this one is the ability to update that center label. Now, as you can see from this slide, we've got a graphic, a title element, and then a subtitle element. With all the things I'm going to show this morning or this evening, wherever you are in the world, we're going to be taking a look inside the IDEs at how we can build some of those things as well. But the humble pie chart, or I suppose if the center is missing, it becomes a donut.
I think you're right, yes.
With
in fact, fancy a donut right now, but
you're not a policeman. With the center label. The next element is the calculator series or indicators. Here we can see on the slide we've got some Bollinger Bands, so we've got the moving average coming across the financial data and then providing the Bollinger Bands above and below, which are calculated on, or usually 2 standard deviations. But a great way to be able to show a lot of information on a single chart using that calculator series. And then the really one that I suppose we're focusing on is that added support for Xamarin Forms. Now, we're talking here native controls that can be utilized in Xamarin Forms. So we will delve into that a little bit as we go through the demos. You wanted to add
the
something?
interesting thing about Xamarin Forms support is, as you'll see in a minute, we originally started out with Xamarin Forms by writing a grid for Xamarin Forms, and with the various issues we found in writing that grid, in providing that grid to you, our customers, and supporting it and making changes to it, we came to realize that although Xamarin Forms is a great technology in a certain way, it's not really that brilliant when you're talking about targeting different platforms. And what we decided to do, well, it must be about a year ago now at least, is to support Xamarin Forms by essentially writing native controls. In other words, writing controls for iOS in Objective-C or Swift, and then writing controls for Android in Java, and then having some kind of Xamarin Forms wrapper around it. And we're going to be seeing a lot of this with Paul's demos in a moment. But that's essentially the conclusion we came to. Xamarin Forms is great as a wrapper, but if you really want to have that rendering speed, if you want to have that ability to have a better user interface and the ability to track, fingers, it turned out that writing natively was the way to go, and hence, all this discussion about native charts today.
Absolutely. Before we get started, if you want to download the native charts packages, jump over to your downloads page in your DevExpress website. It'll look slightly different to mine depending on the subscriptions you have. You can see we've got the native controls area, and if you're targeting just one of the particular operating systems, you can download the zip file for that, or if you're targeting Xamarin Forms, you can download the zip for that. And each of those zip files contains the demo application, which we'll be looking at. Speaking of demo, I'm going to switch over to Xcode to start with.
Oh, this is different.
I love Xcode.
You do? Yeah. I'm just getting used to VS Code, but there we go.
I've extracted my zip files just onto the desktop, so I'm going to jump into the DevExpress iOS folder through the Charts Gallery and load up the Charts Gallery Xcode project. Now, inside here, we're not going to spend time reading or trying to explain a lot of the source code. If you're familiar with Objective-C or Swift, you can jump in and see how things are done. There is some really nice example work happening in here. What we're really interested in today is running this inside the simulator. So for this one, I'm going to run up an iPhone 8 Plus simulator. All the demos I run today are going to be running inside the iOS simulator. I don't have an Android JDK or SDK set up on this particular machine. But we can see, let's move this out of the way, we can see that we've got the Chart Gallery demo running. Now, it is a great place to start. This is native. We're looking here, as you saw with the code, exactly what you can do inside some native code. The Chart Gallery itself is available on the app stores, I believe, Julian.
That is right. In fact, I've downloaded the Chart Gallery from the App Store, and I've been demoing our native charts to people at conferences while in the booth and all that kind of stuff. So I've noticed actually today we need to update it to the latest version, so I'll remind the team to do that later on. But certainly the Chart Gallery is there in the App Store, so if you have an iPhone or iPad, go ahead and try it out.
First,
presumably it's there on the Google Play Store, but I don't have anything to check that with.
First, I'll start with the financial charts demo. And one of the cool things with the demos, they are set up so that they will run in both portrait and landscape mode. It makes more sense to look at this one across on landscape. And here we can see that calculator series. So as I tap on the screen and look at a particular point, we can see the values from the Bollinger Bands being displayed. We can see all the different stock information. And as I scroll across or swipe my finger across to different elements, you can see how nicely that is updated. Not sure how it comes across with GoToWebinar, but certainly on my screen,
No, it's very smooth actually. GoToWebinar is doing quite well with it, and just emphasizes the fact that the rendering speed and the user interface via writing it natively is a lot better than we could achieve with pure Xamarin Forms.
And we can see here, if I pinch and zoom, then we've got the nice response that we expect from the chart itself. It is hard sometimes to emulate a finger when you're using a mouse.
Quite.
Next, we'll take a look at, turn my phone back the right way, not upside down. We shall take a look at the pie and donut charts. And here we're seeing that donut with that center label. And I can click on any of the segments and show the tooltips and values sitting inside there. So that is the Xcode example. Now, I'll quit the simulator and jump back into Xcode. One thing I did want to point out, if you're starting your own project or want to bring these native charts into your project, simply drag in that DX Charts framework library into your project, and that exposes access to everything that we've been looking at with nice easy to read headers showing you what's available inside each of those elements. So what I want to do now is do exactly the same presentation, but on Xamarin Forms. So here I'm running Visual Studio for Mac, which is just the community edition, latest build, all the latest frameworks installed. Really easy to keep up to date. I don't want to show the details, I want to close. And here we can see we've got the Charts Gallery Forms example, which again was sitting on my desktop. Now, the first time you open this, you may need to actually bring in the libraries themselves, and you need to do that for all three elements. So here I've got the Forms project, the Android project, and the iOS project. To bring in the libraries, right-click, Edit References, come across to the .NET Assembly and browse to where you've got them stored. You can see one's on the desktop, and simply add the necessary DLLs into your project. So iOS, I've got the iOS libraries, and for Android, don't double click. Edit References, and I've got the Android libraries. This is a Xamarin Forms example, and this time I'm going to run it up on the iPad Pro. It will invoke the iOS simulator installed by Xcode, changing the actual device so that you get a bit of an idea as to how it runs on each of these things. We can see it's the same code base, 1.1.4, and here we've got exactly the same look and feel, only for the larger form factor. I'll jump into the financial charts as I did before, rotate, so exactly the same presentation, and as I move around, we can see, again, we've got that beautiful set of information. Now remember, this is Xamarin Forms at this point, but it's rendering the native chart. So as Julian was mentioning, the benefits there, performance, it does obviously increase the workload for the teams, but you get a much richer experience inside your application.
So again, the Xamarin Forms part is essentially just wrapping those native controls.
Now if we jump to the pie chart and donuts, just so you can see, it is exactly the same demo, only running inside Xamarin Forms. So that is really quite nice. One of the things that I mentioned on the slide was the ability, particularly in the what's new, for showing that center piece, that nice central label. So what I'm going to do is open up again inside Xamarin the example, run it up on an iPhone XS Max. Not an XS, Julian. It's a XS.
I will note that Paul there is up to date with how to actually pronounce XS.
So here we've got a simple example showing the donut chart with the center label, showing the graphic, showing the title and the subheader. Now, a couple of things I want to point out here. This applies to more than just the native charts, but inside our controls, if we take a look at this code, you're going to see different text patterns or being used inside labels and such. So when you first look at this, you might be like, oh, what does VP actually mean? Well, it's handy to note, if I switch over to Safari, that inside our documentation, it will let you see the different placeholders that you can use inside those text patterns. So in this case, VP is going to display the series point as a percentage. And it's handy. It's a handy reference to have when you're playing around and setting up, those different things. So we could see, let's stop that. The center label itself is being constructed from the PyCenter complex label object, which takes an image, a string, and a string. Because we're dealing with iOS at this point, we're going to see that as a UI image, an S-string, and S string.
Ooh. weird. But
yes and no.
Remember, the PyCenter complex label, in essence, is a native class.
Correct.
So you have to pass it native stuff.
Now, it can be a little confusing sometimes, typecasting a string as NS string, and especially if you start looking at just this little block of text here. So NS string,
hey,
dollar, quote, dollar. So let's break this down just a fraction. The dollar is what you'd be used to in C# for a formatted string. Great use in replacing the old ways of doing format, dot, whatever. So this dollar inside here is representing the dollar symbol in my object. And then we're doing a sum of the data from that class. I will just run it up quickly. There's two things I want to change just to show you how easy some of this manipulation on the charts can be. We'll notice that at the moment this is set to 1 decimal place on percentage, and this dollar value doesn't quite look the way that I would normally represent it. So what I'm going to do is jump in here, and I'm going to say that that is going to be formatted as decimal. So just using a format string for my currency. And then down here, I don't really want to see the decimal. I'm going to remove that from there. Save and run. Then what we expect to see now inside the demo, hoping that it's one of those pausey moments there, Julian. Is it going to load?
Oh, yeah. Is it going to come up? Yay.
See that I've dropped that decimal place on the percentage and formatted my currency a little better to how I want. So it really is that simple when you're playing around with these things. It's handy to keep that page bookmarked or go to the docs and search for the different format strings. We do use them in a lot of places in the code. It's one of those things I think sometimes you forget that things like that are available. So we've seen it in Xcode as native, we've seen it in Xamarin Forms, and we've seen how easy it is to implement the likes of that new center label. Why don't we then spend a minute talking about the roadmap for version 19.1?
So the interesting thing about the roadmap is obviously we're a bit, shall we say, delayed in presenting this what's new in 18.2 for the native charts or native controls. So the roadmap is actually already been published, and we are, or the team is, working hard to complete the various items in that roadmap. We are obviously nearly in February. February is on Friday, and so the team basically have 3 full months, February, March, and April, and be able to release a beta in May and then release the actual product in May. So there's a lot of work to do. And as you know, Paul and I have said already, the poor old team have to write things twice. Lucky them.
When you say poor old, they do a fantastic job. So I think they love the challenge. So last year we added the actual native mobile charting library for iOS, Android, and Xamarin. It's our goal this year, 2019, to focus all those efforts mainly on delivering for Xamarin Forms. And we're going to be working on the following products throughout this release cycle.
Whoa, the scheduler control?
Yes.
Scheduler control, I should say.
Let me run through some of these, Julian. So the scheduler control is going to feature day, week, month, work week, and agenda view. It's going to have time indicator for day, week, and work week, support full data binding, have built-in dialogues for the likes of the appointment editor and reminder notifications. It's going to have Google Calendar support time zones, allow you to resize and move appointments, and add templating for Xamarin Forms for all visual elements. And on top of that, bring across the features such as statuses, labels, recurring appointments, reminders, and have data compatibility across our WinForms, WPF, and ASP scheduler.
So, wow.
Somebody's not getting any sleep.
Somebody's going to be working every weekend, I think. So, yes, the scheduler control is going to be a feature-complete scheduler control. I think that's what we're essentially trying to say here. I think the issue, if you like, with our original grid control, which you're just about to talk about, so I'll let you talk about that, is that you know, the number of features was fairly limited, but the scheduler control for Xamarin Forms, yes, we have to write it twice, once in Java, once in Swift or Objective-C, and then the wrapper for Xamarin Forms, but it's going to be pretty feature complete.
Absolutely. Now, Julian, you don't yet know this, but in March, you and I are doing a webinar on schedulers.
Oh, we are? Oh, thank you for reminding me, or just, in fact, letting me know.
So I've been doing a fair bit of work on scheduling controls across the mobile sector, so using the DevExpress Stream Scheduler on an Ionic app, embedding the ASP scheduler, and then doing comparisons with the DevExpress scheduler on an ASP project. And so we're going to have lots of fun.
Indeed.
Xamarin Grid Control. You mentioned we do have an existing Xamarin control or a grid for the Xamarin Forms. The problem was it was built using cross-platform APIs, and as such, it fell into having some restrictions that were not easily addressed, such as rendering speed when compared against native components. Rather than struggle with that code base, the team said, you know what, we're going to rebuild this thing from the ground up. And so that is exactly what they're doing, a native grid that's fully optimized for Xamarin. The old grid itself is going to go into maintenance mode, which means that we will be focusing on only critical issues if they come up, and all the effort will be going into the new grid. Now we're going to plan to incorporate all of the major features that shipped in the old grid, plus improve rendering speed, auto row height support, and template selector support. And then for anybody that's utilized the old grid, we're going to try and mirror the API as best we can to the new one so that your migration should be fairly seamless.
Groovy.
Next on, sorry?
Excellent.
Next on the list, we've got the UI navigation control, which is a tab view and a side menu. We're looking to add theme support to all of the native controls. So not necessarily just a light and dark, but I'm not going to expand any further than that because otherwise I'll upset the team again. And then finally, we're talking data editors. So text edit, mask editor, date editor, checkboxes, combo boxes, the usual necessity of collecting data from your user.
Okay. And basically the data editors are the, if you like, the standard ones you use in a grid anyway. So that's the reason for the number and the ones that we're going to be doing first of all. Absolutely. Now, obviously, this is 19.1. It's not like we're going to, the team are going to basically throw up their hands in May and say, okay, we released 19.1, we're going on a big vacation until 2020. There's obviously going to be more features that we're going to be planning for 19.2 and 20.1 and so on and so forth. But this is essentially, a rather large roadmap for the next 3 months. I do not envy them at all.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, when it comes to working through what we're going to be delivering, it comes back to what people are asking for through the support center and that feedback. So we very much, the teams, love to hear what you're going to be working on and what you'd like to see, which is a great segue into our questions segment. Now, Julian, I had a quick sneak before at some of the questions, and there's some interesting ones. So how about we spend a couple of minutes and try and answer some of those?
Absolutely. Hang on a minute. I just managed to lose my questions window. So you'll have to read your own for a moment.
That's okay. So one of the questions was, is this a different product than DevExtreme? Yes, it is a different product. The charts themselves, so we've got the charting library for all of the core platforms. The DevExtreme charting is specifically targeted at that JavaScript HTML5 market. And this set of components is built natively for the Xamarin iOS, Android platforms. So very different use case.
And in fact, if you think about it, we have charting products across a whole wide variety of platforms. So if you think about, charting, yes, we use the same terms throughout all those, but the actual coding and the API will change according to the platform you're using. So, the WinForms charting is very different from DevExpress charting in the sense of you writing code to display a chart. The charts themselves look exactly the same, but and have the same terminology and the same features, but you as a developer have to, basically write your code according to the platform.
Absolutely. One question came up, what about a PDF viewer control?
I replied to this one. It's obviously not in this next release. This is start of a brand new product line, shall we say, the native charts, start of a brand new product line for Xamarin Forms. So PDF viewer is one of those things that, would be nice to have, but we find that people would require things like, your UI navigation that you were talking about earlier. The grid is a very, very big popular thing, more popular than a PDF viewer, for example. So, we know we have, obviously controls in, as I said, a lot of different platforms. We know what people are using. We know what people want. We just have a look at those other platforms in a way.
The interesting thing there, that Julian, certainly when it comes to the likes of targeting iOS, there is so much built-in support for viewing PDFs directly in the operating system, in the base libraries, that you don't actually need to go off and regenerate anything. You can throw a PDF stream at a UI web view, for example, it's going to render. You can break.
Oh, that's true.
You can open up and break down a PDF and access text and do other things directly on those base libraries. So that's one of the reasons I think it's also not high on the priority. Now, a few people, including Kirsten. Hello, Kirsten. So Kirsten got up early just to watch this webinar because it's I think it's 5:30 in Melbourne right now, 4:30 for me. So the question was, what about UWP? At this stage, there is no plan for UWP support. Gasp.
Yeah, let's get the Xamarin Forms bit out of the way first.
So now, one of the things that I did want to point out, the roadmap, I don't want to mislead anybody, so stand up and get my hand slapped. The slide I said was the version 19.1 roadmap. It's actually the version 19 roadmap. So that big list is across version 19.1, 19.2.
Ah, je comprends.
So It's the 2019 roadmap. So I certainly don't want to mislead and tell everybody that all of those things are going to be available come May. However, it is still an exciting time, and there's a lot of cool stuff coming through on the Xamarin Forms front. The documentation question, where can I find documentation to use Xamarin, DevExpress and Xamarin? You can head over to docs.devexpress.com. I do believe, I'll just have to...
You had it up there for a moment.
Did. I just have to switch windows. And if you jump into here, there's Xamarin Forms documentation with the task-based help and API reference. Now, some people will also have seen that we are also migrating our documents system across. So there's exciting things happening all around with documentation. And I think from a question perspective,
that's about it. Yeah,
all of them. So thank you everyone for attending today. As I said, it was going to be a slightly different format to our normal What's New. If you have any questions, comments, Julian B at devexpress.com, first and foremost.
Or Paul U at devexpress.com.
CTO. And we love the feedback. If you want to see particular webinars, technical webinars about anything, give us some feedback so we know what sort of stuff to plan. Check out the webinars page at devexpress.com. We've got a heap of webinars coming up over the next 2 months. We've got security best practices with you and I. We've got Don presenting on some WinForms, coolness, Mehul looking at responsive web designs, all listed on there. Register, get a seat early, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Absolutely. Amanda?
All right. Thanks, guys. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel, and you will also get a follow-up email with a link to this webinar. Also, as Paul mentioned, we have several upcoming webinars from ASP.NET security practices to revamping your WinForms apps. You can visit devexpress.com/webinars to register. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.